My name is Rasool. I'm a Research Fellow for Technology Enhanced Learning at Ravensbourne University in London. In this presentation, we're going to look at how to build a life of personal and social value by acting on a daily ground truth. If you want to get in touch with me, please feel free to do so through my LinkedIn link that you see here on the page. Now, some software has actually been created to help people to map how well they're meeting their needs through their emotional intelligence and their social intelligence. And that's the Energy Diamond Atmoscape profiling software, which has been used for mapping a person's current personal value. Now, that can be used to help the person discover the center of gravity of their day's needs and discover what their day's ground truth might actually be. So what happens is they complete an online questionnaire and they rate themselves on how well they're meeting their needs. And what will happen is that through that process of rating themselves on how well they're meeting their needs and putting their scores in for how well they're meeting the needs for themselves, but also how well they're meeting needs for others, they can slowly build up a picture of their current weights of importance, if you will, that there are to meeting the different needs that they have in their life for themselves as well as for others. And it's these weights of importance or level of capacity or competence with which they're meeting their needs that can be analysed to discover where the centre of gravity, if you will, of all these scores and numbers and weights actually is. What's the thing that their entire life seems to be resting on or centred on, which will most likely be the ground truth that they really need to be acting on and working on that day. So here someone has scored themselves on how well they're meeting their needs for themselves as well as others, but it's possible to take these scores and in a paint by numbers way turn them into colours, and this way we get a colour coded version of the scores, and it's a bit more easier to look at and make sense of as well. It's easy, for example, to see that where the areas are that the person's doing least well, in this case where the twos are, it's kind of orange there, and where the areas are that the person's doing most well. In this case it's to do with how they're helping other people, particularly around their intellect and helping them evolve and transform that, as well as working with their creativity and work with that practically and transform that too. But this doesn't really tell us where the centre of gravity is, and also the picture looks very blocky, so it's possible to use software to just smooth out these colours and get a better high resolution image of what's going on for this person in their life. Now, the image that gets generated is something that's called an atmoscape. Atmo is Sanskrit for core or essential self, and scape, of course, is to do link with the word landscape. So an atmoscape is actually a picture of the inner landscape of your core or essential self, and of course that's where your ground truth is likely to be. It's likely to be somewhere within you in your inner nature, and if it's possible to analyze that terrain that represents your inner nature, it's possible to find out where the hive it actually is. It's possible to identify where the center of gravity is in that particular area of your inner nature. In this case, with the scores and numbers that we saw being put in, for this person, it looks like the center of gravity is to do with how they help themselves, specifically on how they tune in to their emotions for themselves and how they experience their own emotions. So this is indicating that if this person just focus on experiencing and knowing their own emotions for today, they learn to tune into their own emotions and just calibrate with them and get sensitive to them and observe them, then they would find that it would make the best of their day. Everything else would kind of naturally fall into place. Time throughout today, just centering on what emotions were flowing through them, just observing them, just watching them. It's not necessarily about expressing their feelings or transforming their feelings. It's really just about watching them, being a witness to them. So the software can analyze all the numbers and it can identify the center of gravity of the numbers, and then it can discover which need was that particular center of gravity associated with, and it can help the person say, right, okay, this is what I need to do. The need seems to be a ground truth that's related to me helping myself. It's specifically about the emotional intelligence to do with self-awareness. In this case, it's about experiencing and knowing things, and it's specifically in this case to do with emotions and how the person connects into their self-esteem and their confidence. Now, it's also possible to add up all the scores that the person put in and compare them to the maximum score they could have given themselves. For example, if they scored each need on a scale of 0 to 10, and then of the 30 needs that they put scores in for, they could have scored themselves a maximum of 300. Now, if we add up the scores that they actually put in, and compare them to 300, we can compare them in a way where we get percentage, and we can see how skilled are they, how qualified are they currently to meet that ground truth and go and work with it for this particular day. But of course, just being skilled in being able to meet a need doesn't mean the person's actually going to go and meet it, let alone whether they're going to meet the right kind of need as well in order for them to generate meaningful value in their lives. So we need to find a way where we can identify whether the person is actually being true to that ground truth. And software here can actually do that. It can look at the person's personality and look at their deeper character and see how much of a match is there between the two, how much the personality is supporting what the character is authentically trying to do with its ground truth. And that combination of skills and commitment determines the impact that person's going to make on their world in that particular day. For example, if the person had 80% of the skills they need to work with a ground truth, but they're only half-hearted in how they were committed to working with it, and otherwise they're only 50% committed, then 50% of 80% is only 40%. That would be the impact they would be making on the world. In this particular case, you can see the person had 59% of the skills that they need to meet with their priority for the day, that ground truth, and they're only 29% committed. That their personality is only supporting their character in its search for realizing ground truth, only 29%. So the combination of those two numbers, 29% and 59%, yields 17%. And that shows the impact the person's currently having on the world, the current effect they're having on the world. Obviously, compared to 100%, 17% is something where they could be doing almost 6 times better than that, which is also indicated here. And it's 5.9 times more impact is possible for this particular person if they just got themselves more aligned and more skilled in being able to work with their ground truth and work with their priority for the day. So when we look at this, the thing that's really important is not necessarily skills, but alignment and commitment. Skills are much easier to upgrade, but getting more committed and aligned to the truth of what you've got to work with in your life is a lot harder. So always it should be the priority that you should try and be more committed and aligned to what you've truly got to work on within yourself. Providing you have that commitment and alignment, it's inevitable that you will eventually acquire the skills and be able to act on that priority and realize it. This picture that we've taken is essentially a kind of a selfie, but it's a selfie of a person's state of mind. It's a selfie of their inner landscape of how they're trying to form and shape their lives and how they think and how they actually act. So it's something that I've come to call a mental selfie. And if you can take a selfie of your mind, if you can take a mental selfie, then you can, very much like how you would look in a mirror, notice things that are out of place and adjust those things and leave the things alone that seem to be okay. You can even share your selfie with other people and maybe identify where you've got strengths and they've got weaknesses, and maybe you can help them out or vice versa. So all is possible just by taking a mental selfie, a snapshot of your state of mind, of the landscape of your needs and your essential and core self. Now, it's also possible to look at that view and unwrap it, because currently, just with that single view, it's not really possible to see whether a person's meeting their needs in logical ways, rational, just working with ethics and working more from a felt perspective rather than a rational, thought-through, logical kind of perspective. So it's possible with the software to actually unwrap that image into logical and intuitive perspectives, left brain, if you like, and right brain perspectives, and identify where the person is oriented towards. Are they more oriented towards logical way of doing things, or more oriented towards a right brain intuitive way of doing things? So it's possible to discover which kind of side they are falling on in a particular day. And if you combine that with the actual priority or the ground truth for the day, then it's possible for that individual to know exactly how to work with that ground truth, whether they should approach it from a logical, rational, realistic perspective, or whether they should just try and connect into it more intuitively with their feelings and their imagination and not worry about necessarily being realistic or being in reality with it, but allowing themselves to be a bit more open and imaginative and work with it in a kind of instinctive way where they just wing it through the day without a plan, without any kind of strategy. So in this particular case, you can see this person's identified as having much more necessary drive at the character level through logical approaches. So if they're going to make the best of their ground truth that day in terms of how they experience and know their feelings, then this is indicating that they should really try and connect into their feelings in a logical and rational kind of way, and try and maybe make a plan or a to-do list or some kind of structure or strategy or framework through which they can connect into their feelings and be able to observe them. Now, if they do this, they will make the best of that priority and the best of themselves for that day. If they try and act in a way that's opposite to that, they will literally be going against their own current and going against their own flow, in which case they're going to experience resistance, they're going to spend energy unnecessarily, and they're probably going to find by the time they get to the end of the day that they feel more tired and they don't necessarily feel as clear as they could be in terms of what they were trying to do. Now, it's all very well doing that for yourself as a person, but how do you then take that personal value that you built through attending to your own ground truth in the right kind of mindset, and then couple it with what other people are trying to do with their ground truth and their mindsets. How do we go about building social value with others? Well, there's something that we can do that is compare our selfies, if you will, with theirs, and we can match them to people whose selfies are like ours, or perhaps people whose selfies are like very different from ours, maybe even opposite to ours, as well as people who maybe have a mix of similar and opposite qualities. So it's possible to match ourselves to people who are very similar to us. It turns out these people are the people who've got the same strengths and weaknesses as us, and if you look at the selfies, the colours are roughly in the same areas. Now these are the people who can support us and reinforce what's working within us. However, because they've got the same weaknesses as us, they're not the best people to necessarily learn from or stretch ourselves or challenge ourselves with. For that, we need to be with people who are opposite to us and who maybe have got strengths where we've got weaknesses, and vice versa. And lastly, we need to be spending time with people who are a mix of those qualities, where some of our strengths match and some of our weaknesses match, but then there are other areas where they're different. And these people are really the best for being sounding boards, for offering us reflection each day. These three kinds of help, support, challenge, and reflection, are like vitamins. You kind of need to get them every day in different doses and from the right sources. And when you're not getting them for a short time, it's not too much of a problem. But if you've gone for a long time without support, or nobody's really stretched you, or you've not taken time to reflect, then it can affect your growth as a person. So it's really important to get support, challenge, and reflection every day for yourself if you can. But if you can't, you should certainly be going out and looking for people or resources that will give you those kinds of help. And that way, your growth won't be stunted. You'll end up growing in a sustainable way, and in a way that you're effectively having a balanced diet for all the things that you're getting in your life. Now, this was actually tested out in a trial within the NHS a few years ago for a self-help mental health group. And we took a dozen self-help patients and we took them through this process where they rated how they were meeting their needs each week, and we identified what the ground truth was for them and their priority, and we got them to work on that for themselves. But we also matched them up to other people in the group so they could actually support each other, and we had some practitioners in who could also help them through coaching, through art therapy, through physical exercise, whatever was needed and that was aligned to their particular ground truth that day. What we also did was take those selfies and combine them together so we could get a selfie for the group each week. We went a step further though. We didn't just identify what the overall state of the group was. We took the selfies that we created each week for the group and we stitched them together like frames in a film strip. And we were able to create a movie of how the whole group was responding to the treatment program. And we went a little bit further than that. We actually could make a forecast of where that group's ground truth was likely to be in the future and get them prepared to go and work with that. So if we look at how that process was done, we took the selfies you see here, like 1, 2, and 3 for the group, and they're all behind the scenes. So we created some intermediate sets of numbers that we could create a smooth transition between each particular selfie. And then we took all the images that were generated and we stitched them together, like I said, like frames in a film strip, and we created a movie. So what we've got here is that actual movie that was done with that particular trial. And you can see at the beginning of the trial, they weren't doing particularly well in terms of how they were dealing with their own reality. Well, they were doing quite well psychologically for themselves, as well as how they're helping others. And you can see the date for this was on the 18th of April, back in 2012. And if I actually scroll through this particular movie, you can see exactly what the state of the group was on any given week. And you can see as the weeks go by, there are some fluctuations where people revert and relapse a little bit. But by the end of the trial, the program, you can see that the image is a lot more blue, meaning that the people involved were actually operating at much higher levels of competence in how they were meeting their needs. But the beauty of this is that with a movie, you can almost look at an MRI-like way at the movie and detect tiniest features and know what they actually mean. But when you run the movie and play it, it's possible to see how the group is transitioning through meeting its needs each week. And it's possible, just like with a weather forecast on TV, to make a forecast of these trends and identify where the group might be in the following week. And from the picture, it's possible to identify what the ground truth might be that the team needs to work with in order to help that group as much as possible. Of course, it's possible to do this for individuals as well and make forecasts for them to identify whether they're heading for a period of difficulty or whether they're heading for a period of opportunity and get them prepared for that through their friends, through their therapists, or through some other kinds of resources. So I'd like to thank you for giving the time for me to show you this presentation. And if you want to get any further details from me, please feel free to do so through my LinkedIn link that you see here. Thank you.